What if we could challenge your thoughts around the topic of legacy so you could live intentionally today? I'd like to welcome Chris Ford to the Designing Your Legacy podcast. He's joining us today from Northern California in the United States, and he'll tell us a little bit about his thoughts regarding one of his favorite books called The 12 Pillars by Jim Rohn. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Angelina. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Thank you so much. Yes, so I know my first question is to share with the listeners a little bit about your background. I know that you have worked with a number of mentors, whether they're spiritual mentors, business mentors, and I think right now you're in the place where you're raising capital, whether it's $50 to $100 million to invest in commercial real estate, whether it's apartment buildings, storage units, say more.
The dream is to get to 50 to 100 million a year. That's kind of the framework and the goal for Wingate Capital, which is how I spend a good chunk of my time. My whole career has been around real estate. I got into the business when I was 18 from reading a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I definitely recommend pretty much everyone out there, especially those interested in business, finance, real estate, accounting. I started in residential sales, sold nothing my first year, just banged the phones, doing cold calls while going to community college. And then second year, I met a mentor. It was very key in helping me sell 10 million my second year, about 10 homes in the East Bay area where I grew up here. And then I transferred to Berkeley, studied business undergrad at Haas. Absolutely loved it, although it was kind of a crazy time to be there. For those that remember when Trump was elected, that's when I transferred, and Berkeley was not a happy place at the time. Nonetheless, I transitioned to real estate private equity, and I worked in finance, kind of cut my teeth at a firm in San Francisco who owned 100 plus buildings. And then now, today, in early 2021, I knew I always wanted to do real estate entrepreneurially. So I got out of the corporate world, and now I focus on a few main roles, businesses. The two primary is my day job for now, which I really enjoy. I went back into brokerage. I'm a luxury broker. I have a partner in his 50s, and we sell on average $3 million homes based in Danville, California. We focus on the 680 corridor here, which is just a freeway of, a great suburban freeway in the East Bay, and different neighborhoods and markets that, I grew up in and know and love. And then, so that's with Anglin Volkers. And like I said, I have a partner in that business. And then Wingate Capital is really just me for now. I have a VA who crushes it and helps me on all my businesses and consulting work. But yeah, both of those are sales, marketing, business development, relationship building related. And I love it. They're synergistic businesses as well. And then I do a little bit of consulting still for Mosser at this time. This is filmed in, early 2024. It might change in the future, but do some consulting work around capital raising and deal finding, on and off market deal finding. And then there's a whole nother thing that's a little early to talk about now, but it's basically called Redemptive Real Estate, or the Redemptive Investment Network, that I'm working on with a partner as well, that we're super excited about, and it's more tied to my legacy and how I can make a bigger impact with my time, talent, and treasure. That's very much in the ideation stage still, but that's a high level what I do.
Yes. And I think you mentioned you're looking to partner with top tier multifamily operators. Is that still the case?
Yeah. So with Wingate, the high level philosophy, which I've just realized, developed over my 8, 9, 10 years in real estate, is that I think the highest risk adjusted returns in real estate, if not like the whole investment landscape, can be found with value add business plans for recession resistant product types like multifamily, mobile home parks, self-storage, RV parks. I'm also interested in senior housing more recently. Marinas are a fascinating business too. But these are recession resistant commercial real estate product types. And then in growing markets that are business friendly, tax friendly, and landlord friendly. So not California, not New York, not Chicago. But you could probably guess where I'm interested in partnering with operators and doing deals, which is the Carolinas, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Georgia, parts of Colorado, Arizona, etc. So where people are moving to, where typically warmer locations where boomers can be more comfortable retiring.
Yes, where the numbers can pencil out.
Exactly. Yes, not in Beverly Hills in your backyard, and not in the Bay Area for the most part.
Yes. So let's jump into this book. You had challenged me during our preamble conversation to pick up a copy of The 12 Pillars by Jim Rohn. And I did. And I read it twice. And so Where would you like to start? Because I would like to cover all 12 pillars. I think it would add value to any of the listeners, especially given our day and age, where sometimes some good grounded common sense can make a difference.
Absolutely. Common sense is not so common these days for some reason. We're losing it for, that's why I think books are so important. A lot of people don't feel that it's worth spending 10, 20, $30 on a great book. And, that was me for probably 16 years of my life. Didn't love reading until, tying it back to part of my story and getting into business, was I joined a network marketing company when I was 16 called Vima at the time. For those, maybe you'll have some listeners that know that company. It was a unique time and a unique company. Still around today, but not as a network marketing model as far as I know. But the big point that I brought that up is because it really, that environment and that business opportunity very young allowed me to surround myself with more successful people than myself. And I didn't grow up in some crazy neighborhood or community. The East Bay is very wealthy, but not, my parents are small business owners and have grinded it out for 30 years and been able to provide for me and my 3 older siblings. But anyways, without going too far down that path, 12 Pillars by Jim Rohn is a very special book to me. Unfortunately, I forget who told me about it. Actually, I think it's one of my buddies named Scotty, who has got a great YouTube channel as well. But Scotty gave me this book probably 5-6 years ago when we were both living in San Francisco. And it's a short novel. It's a story, but it's extremely impactful. And these 12 pillars are basically they're pillars on someone's home, a guy named Charlie. And Michael breaks down his car right in the beginning of the book, outside of Charlie's, or around the corner from Charlie's house, ends up walking down the street, meeting him. And he, for the whole book, I don't know if this is kind of a spoiler alert, but the guy that he meets in front of Charlie's house ultimately tells him about these 12 pillars and why the house was built with 12 pillars, because they coincide with Charlie's belief system about these key core 12 pillars that all tie, and the last of which ties to legacy. Why it's such a relevant book, and it's great to hear that you read it twice. So before we dive
and
in,
I cried
know
at the
that
end.
yes, I don't want to. That's why I said I don't really want to spoil it, because I really want to encourage people to read the book. I don't want to just like break down the whole book so people are like, oh, I don't have to read it now. Trust me, you can read it in like 3 to 5 hours, if not faster, if you're a fast reader. And so I've read it. I finished it for like the 5th time this morning to re-prepare for this podcast. And I've given, 20 copies of it to friends. Usually what I say to people, and what I said to you, Angelina, is if you love the book, if it's you like 10 out of 10 love it, and it really impacted you in some way, I challenge you to give 5 copies away to other people and challenge them to do the same thing. And so this book has had a ripple effect among my friends and family who've read it, and pretty much everyone loves it, when they read it. So
would you like to start with the first pillar, or where would you like to?
So actually, I would like to, I think starting with the last pillar, which is leave a legacy, would be a pretty relevant place to start. Each chapter that coincides with the pillar has kind of a principle, the 12th of which is leave a legacy. It has a quote. So for example, we may or may not go through all of them, but with chapter 12, it says, live a life that will help others spiritually, intellectually, physically, financially, and relationally. Live a life that serves as an example of what an exceptional life can look like. And now there's a letter. If I was going to read anything from the book, I would want to read Charlie's final letter to Michael, if I may.
Yes, you may. And I just want to add regarding pillar number 12, a couple of the bullet points that I wrote down that I thought were a great takeaway is that the brevity of life is its biggest surprise. And
yes,
I thought that like, oh, yeah. I mean, if I think back to a decade ago, it's like it went by in 10 minutes. And Charlie's advice to leave a legacy, or I might say design a legacy intentionally in our living years, because we are but breezes of wind that blow through this world. And we get to walk the path that's been prepared by others who have gone before us. So please go ahead.
Absolutely. That stuck out to me as well. So I won't give you more of the context of this letter because it will spoil the book, but it'll say this. Actually, the letter will spoil it, so I'm sorry for that. But dear Michael, if you're reading this, then it means that I am no longer here. I wanted to share the final pillar of success with you personally over coffee in the workshop, just like old times. But the very fact that I'm not here makes the case for how important the last pillar is. One thing I realized this past year is how short life is. It seems like yesterday, just yesterday, that I was a schoolboy playing with my friends. It seems such a short time ago that I fell in love with Sandra and we began our family. By the way, you finally met Sandra, I'm sure. She is a beautiful and incredible woman, Michael. I was so blessed to share this life with her. Such a short time ago, I was building my businesses and selling them, building my fortune. And even when I finally retired 15 years ago, it felt like I had so much time left. The brevity of life is its biggest surprise, Michael. So, what to make of all the pillars I've taught you so far? The very pillars of success that have guided my life so well. They all wrap up nicely and are perfected by the final pillar: leave a legacy. We are but breezes of wind that blow through this world, here one day, gone the next. No one knows how long they will live. You cannot choose how long you will live, Michael, but you can choose how well you will live. I believe that how well you live is bound inherently with how much you leave for others who come behind you and follow your path. I never was a self-made man, Michael. I did not believe that there is such a thing. I believe that each of us walks along the path that has been prepared by others who have gone before us. My goal in life has been to live it in such a way that it would serve those who have come after me, to blaze a trail that would allow others to move forward in their lives faster than if they had to blaze that trail themselves. It has been my job to leave a legacy by teaching others the pillars of success, and not just to teach them, but to live them. My actions are the proof that my words are true. Michael, we must live out the philosophies we passionately believe and have been sharing with others. In doing so, we give them the credence they need to be effective. So many people waste their short lives here and then spend their final days weighted down with regret. There is no more time to go back and redo their lives. There is nothing left but a wish for more time, a wish that will never be fulfilled. Michael, we all have two choices as we live. We can make a living or we can design a life. There are many who spend their lives making a living. They go off to work each day with no vision for what their lives could become, and before they know it, their lives are over. And some are so fearful that the dreams they do have will forever go unfulfilled because they never have the courage to take a risk that would enable them to reach their goals and live their dreams. You can be different, though. You can design a life. Yes, it would have been better if you had started earlier. The earlier, the better. But at 40 years old, you have a good 40 years left. You can accomplish tremendous things in your remaining years if you will design them before you live them. What will make them powerful will be if you design a life based on the pillars of success, with the goal of leaving a legacy for others to follow. Live a life that will help others spiritually, intellectually, physically, financially, and relationally. Live a life that serves as an example of what an exceptional life can look like. Let others lead small lives, Michael, but not you. Let others argue over small things, but not you. Let others cry over small hurts, but not you. Let others leave their fortune in someone else's hands, but not you. Leaving a legacy is like planting a tree. As that seed grows into a tree, it will provide seeds so that the future generations can plant their own. You have your entire life ahead of you, Michael. Live it to the fullest potential that you have. Almost done. My legacy is fulfilled in part by teaching you how to live your best life. Your legacy will be to do the same for others. Give of yourself, sacrifice for the good of others. Take the time to help others and teach them. Be patient, loving, and loyal. This is goodbye, my friend. I'm glad to have met you. You are a wonderful young man with a kind and generous heart. You've touched my heart, and hopefully I have touched yours with an indelible impression that will help you create your own lasting ripple. Your friend, Mr. Charlie Davis.
I hope that somebody will pick up the book. Yes.
I know.
Yes. So thank you for reading that. Would you like to start with the first pillar? I wrote down a couple of bullet points, and I thought we might banter about each and pique the curiosity of the listener. Okay. So I think for the first pillar, it has to be personal development. I know that you brought your own notes, so I'm just going to start, and then you can share your thoughts. Okay. Charlie brought up, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And I thought that's very interesting because people don't always want to work on themselves. It can be uncomfortable to hear feedback. And so I thought that was very interesting. And also when somebody does work harder on themselves, I think it's a very wise idea to seek out independent feedback, whether that's with a coach, a mentor, an advisor, a group of 5 friends, whoever it is, that can see who we are sometimes better than we can see ourselves, and to ask for that, whether it's once a week, once a month, once a quarter, so that somebody doesn't just, and I think Charlie talks about this later on, that it's easy to fall into the lull of life, the lull of the day-to-day. And he also mentioned that if one stays at the same skill level, they'll never go beyond, whether it's pay or promotion. So to start working on oneself, whether that's reading books, attending seminars, studying the best people, including salespeople. I think a lot of times people don't realize how smart salespeople are. They think that they just make those cold calls. They don't realize that some of the best salespeople have to work on themselves and refine themselves. And then Charlie brought up, then apply what you learn to your everyday lifestyle. And humans have the dignity to choose to be all or to be less. What say you, Chris?
I love it. I agree with all of it. And, there's a big framework throughout the whole book, or I guess a backbone of it is self-improvement and this idea of being a lifelong learner. And that there's many, many quotes. This book has hundreds of quotes that, you could hang around your bathroom for inspiration or wherever you get that. But being a lifelong learner has really, really stuck with me, and not relying on what he calls or making it a priority for self-education. And what does that mean? What does that look like? He basically says formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. And self-education is what you do, when you're after college, after school, after traditional education, which, it doesn't give you a whole lot of what like Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich called specialized knowledge, where most of the wealth and impact is actually made with unique niche specialized knowledge that often has to come through an individual, a real business, real life experience that most teachers just unfortunately don't have and can't give you what they don't have. Even going to one of the top business schools in the country, Haas, it was a great experience, but I can't tell you like a single thing or a single professor that really, I remember many of them, and they made a great impact, but none of them are really relate to like what I'm doing now, and what probably most of my colleagues would say, and classmates that are now in the working world would say that like everything they've learned is from specialized knowledge and self-education, whether it's continuing to learn and soak up as much as they can through their job, or even more important, what they're doing after working hours, after your 9 to 5, what are you doing from 5 to 9 or even earlier, or later and early in the morning is, why I'm so passionate about books and, have read 100 plus books, that have really shaped my life and my character and have helped me think about my legacy. Jim Rohn certainly at the top of the list, and this book is obviously up there. So that's a big theme, being a lifelong learner. That's amazing. He starts off with his first most important pillars that I largely agree with, is health and the gift of relationships. So he says, live a life of health. You should make sure that the outside of you is as good as the reflection of the inside of you. And
Is this the first pillar?
Yeah,
okay.
I think so. The chance encounter is the first title. The only way things are going to change for you is when you change, which kind of goes along the lines of that, the whole theme of personal development and self-education and self-improvement. And then, I guess the first pillar is live a life of health. Again, you should make sure that the outside of you is as good of a reflection on the inside of you, which is, it's so simple and intuitive, but people don't always think about that. There's a lot of the world is a pretty superficial place, and it's only gotten more superficial, I feel like, with social media, that people don't think about working on themselves and their character and virtues, which ties to a later principle about, there's this quote hanging in Mr. Davis's office by, I think it's Henry David Thoreau, that something like, or is it, one key to having influence in others is to have others perceive you as, relates to the quote. I don't have the quote, but he basically says, all of life is sales. One key to having influence with others is to have others perceive you as a person of talent and virtue. Talent and virtue meaning character and skill. And anyways, the
Yes.
first pillar, live a life of health. I don't know if you had any comments there.
Yeah, I also just wanted to set some context that, yes, Michael was a young man. He was driving by, his car broke down. He had a wife and 2 children, and he had not planned for life to get tough. He was making, I think, about $40,000 and kind of grumpy about that. And I think that's that moment where he comes across the philosophy of Charlie to kind of offer him a new direction, a new insight of what could be possible. Charlie owns, at the time, Charlie refers to Mr. Davis, and Michael doesn't realize that Charlie and Mr. Davis are one and the same. So Charlie says Mr. Davis owns many businesses, and then Charlie sees, Charlie is helping to clean the pool of this large house that's 14,000 square feet, so that obviously begins the connection then with Michael, who is a young man. And I, before I move on to the second pillar, I did want to highlight something that you had said before, that you will seek out people and their advice that have actually done well. So like you're
Yeah,
going to ask for health advice from somebody who does go to the gym. You're going to ask
exactly.
for relationship advice from someone who does have a healthy relationship. You're going to ask for financial advice for someone that is making it every day. And I think one of the things, I'm in my 40s now, when I look back, advice can either lead you down the right street or it can lead you down the wrong street. So you have
For
to
sure.
be very discerning in realizing what is the fruit of that individual's life. And sometimes people do fall down, and it's beyond their control, especially politically. Executives sometimes, but having said that, it is understanding what is the results in that individual's life. And again, if they fall down and they're in the valley, what are they doing to get back up again? Because sometimes it's the money you make, but even Mr. Davis made the point that there can be litigation. So how do you make the money back again? Because some people can, repeat because they've already got the principles down. Okay. Anything else on the first pillar?
Doesn't exactly relate to the first pillar, but totally. I thank you for touching it. I know we've had separate conversations offline about, mentorship and different mentors in my life and how important of a role they've played in different areas. And it's such a key principle that was, I remember at the time in my teenage years, was very profound, but it's like to take advice from people that have what you want. There's everyone's willing to offer advice, but it's pretty important to put blinders on and clear out the noise and just focus on the voices and the advice of people that are time tested. Like it says at the end of, in the letter to Michael that I wrote, like your proof is in the actions and like the fruit of your life, which the Bible talks a lot about. It's another important book to me. But what I was going to say related to that was that obviously mentorship has been super key, and we can dive into that. But taking a step back before going onto other pillars is like most of my life growing up, I didn't have a good framework for what I thought success was and what it was to me. Obviously, success to everyone is going to be, you're entitled to your own definition of success. But for me, it was very skewed and influenced by culture, which I think will largely lead you astray. It was very, the guy or gal with the big house or the attractive spouse or the nice car,
Bling bling.
the fancy job. Yeah, like the superficial trappings of success was like I thought was everything until I in my late teenage years, early 20s, started meeting more of the people that had these trappings of success, and I saw several times that the other areas of their life was in shambles and not what I would consider successful at all. It's not like a huge failure. Not that they couldn't turn areas of their life around, but oftentimes people sacrifice certain areas of life just to focus and over-index on certain areas. If you don't, again, think about success holistically and are intentional about it. So for me, which we either can get into now or after we get to the pillars, is it led me to think about what whole life success looks like for me.
Broad wealth.
And what was that?
Broad wealth. Broad wealth.
Broad wealth. Yeah, sure. Is that what you call it? Or
Well, it's broad. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Wealth in all areas of life.
You questioned beyond the superficiality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, are you really happy?
Yes. Yeah. I also don't think, maybe this is an unpopular opinion. I don't think life is like about happiness. I think that's a misnomer. Like people, their whole goal is to achieve happiness, and I don't think that's like the point of life. Rather, I think it's to grow and to learn and to give back. And I think if you the more you chase happiness, like the more I think it's, for me, I'll speak for myself. The more that I've tried to chase happiness and focus on happiness, I feel like the more it's eluded me, and the more that I focus on like getting up every day and doing what I need to do, regardless of how I feel, and focus on growth and progress in all my areas of life, happiness, or more so peace, how like Naval Ravikant kind of defines happiness as more in terms of peace, is more prevalent feeling in my life when I'm growing and putting my head down and focusing on like day to day. So I can get into whole life success principles after, and how it relates to kind of how I think about goal setting and whatnot. But keeping down the 12 pillars, the next one is the gift of relationships. And his
Oh, I
quote here
have
is,
this. Oh, I have the second pillar is live a life of total well-being. And I wanted to rap about that for a minute.
oh, okay, sure.
Okay. So I think you brought this up before. He talked about feedback, and which I call debriefing. Debriefing is kind of a military term. Um, and they talked about accepting mediocrity. Will you accept mediocrity? Because the masses do. And I actually have
Hmm.
a list that a friend sent to me that I want to reference at some point. And it's interesting that the list is the 18 signs of growing up with a scarcity mindset.
Hmm.
And it's like in polarity, it's like the opposite of this. So I want to bring it up in one moment. But
Awesome.
I think Charlie made this point about changing one's life and working on oneself versus giving up, because the masses oftentimes give up. They live those lives of silent desperation, whether they mean to, whether they fall into it, whether they feel trapped and there's no way out. And like you had brought it before regarding health, Charlie spoke about three-dimensional health: the body, the soul, and the spirit. The soul
Mm.
being the intellect and the emotions. And he brought up this very cutting point, which I thought was just so fascinating. He said many people will have pets that can run like the wind, but they themselves cannot climb a flight of stairs. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? And he brought up the point that there are people who are very intellectually smart, but they forget about their bodies. Or there are people
Right.
who are so spiritual, but they cannot master their finances. So what good are they on this earth in terms of being able to make things happen? Um, and that we function best when we live in balance of the intellect,
Hmm.
the emotions, as well as the spiritual life. And he talked about it almost like a three-layered onion, the outer being the body, the second being the soul. I think the third is the spirit. You might have to correct me on that
Yeah.
one, Chris. But
Yep.
he spoke about this idea that each rests on the other, and we're only as strong as the layer above and below. And if Michael didn't want to go and exercise, he told Michael, go for a nightly walk with
Yeah.
your significant other or your pet or whoever, but go for a nightly walk, even if it's just for a half an hour, because our bodies are the only place that we are living, this meat suit in this life. And the stronger each layer of the onion gets, then the stronger they make the other layers. Your thoughts, Chris?
Thank you for pausing, because there's so many amazing nuggets in there. And the thinking of, as it relates to holistic success, it's like, yes, and for me there's like these eight, some have more, some have less, but like eight core areas of life: and spiritual, relational, career and mission, lifestyle, um you know giving back, contribution and giving back, and others. But like at the core of it, and as it relates to another one of my like mental models that I call impact theory, is how I think about how most people are impacting the world, and who I admire, and how I'd like to think about my legacy, and how I impact the world is relates to this concept of like this onion of, soul being at the deepest level, mind and emotions being at kind of the next deepest, and then body and health and being at the, I guess, most surface level. And that if it's hard to have true body health if your mind is not, you know what I mean? You could be the fittest person in the world, but if you're mentally not that, if you're depressed or, struggle from anxiety, it's going to be hard to have a real health. And if you have great health and great mind, but like your soul is troubled for some reason, like that's the deepest, you know what I mean? You're never going to have real peace, which is like probably the most valuable thing. So when I think about true impact, I think about it like on this scale where the x-axis is like the number of people that I want to impact, or that someone has impacted in terms of rating someone's like impact level in this life. And then on the y-axis, it's body at the lowest, mind and emotions in the middle, and soul at the top, being the most important. And if we look at the people, a lot of people might agree that the people that have had the most impact throughout thousands of years, at the deepest level, are like a lot of religious figures, because they've impacted so many people's souls at like a massive level, right? Like why is
Like Gandhi or someone.
Gandhi, Jesus, why are these figures so talked about? Is because they've left the biggest legacy ever, which is the most important legacy of what saving souls, essentially. Lower than that, maybe lower than that. I mean, everyone's opinion is going to be different. For me, like someone like a Tony Robbins, who's like, I don't want to compare to Jesus, but is like impacting people's minds and emotions, or someone like a Jim Rohn writing these books and really helping people's mind and emotions um, and in lives in many ways through that and through their work, and they're doing it at scale. Maybe below that is, people that are helping, like Tony Horton of P90X or whatever, that is helping people's bodies at scale. Um, so when I think about it, it's like my deepest, well, a lot of what I do day to day is business and real estate. And like, I chose real estate for a lot of reasons, but it's a people business and I love people. And ultimately I'd like them to look back at my life and my work, and see that I'm really trying to, it's deeper than just real estate. And that's, it ties to like my faith in God and like why I feel like I'm on this earth. And also ultimately wanting to, like Jim Rohn says, or like Charlie says, exemplify an exceptional life and an exceptionally balanced life and success in all areas and not sacrificing one for another. I'd rather have an 8 out of 10 in all areas than a 10 out of 10 in 3 and a train wreck in the rest. So
Yeah,
those are my thoughts.
that's awesome. I think sometimes people, they forget to pay attention to the details of each area of their life because they either get caught up, or if they're in a job that they don't like, that job can suck the energy out of them. And so when they go home, the last thing they want to
Definitely.
do is exercise. And I think that's where Charlie is pushing Michael. Like, even if you don't want to go for that 30-minute walk at night, do it anyways. And then come back and I'll tell you the next pillar.
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to move on to the third pillar. And my sneaking intuition is we're probably going to get through 6, and then you'll have
I
to come
know.
back on and talk about the last 6.
That's
Okay.
all good. It also leaves some, cliffhanger for people to actually read the book, which I really hope.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, it goes to this idea of homespun common sense. And even though some of these pillars might be idealistic, I think there are great principles to start with, to remember once again, to not get caught up in the world. Because sometimes we have to hear these things because it's like, oh, yeah, that is right. And we
Yeah,
forget. Or we might not have, like in the 5 closest people to us, someone that can remind us. Okay. So the third pillar, I'm just going to rattle off some stuff and then you can comment in. The third
sounds good.
pillar is the gift of relationships. And they talked about the gift of other people. So I'm glad that you love people, because I think that there's a line in the movie Jerry Maguire that you have to love people, or if not, you can't sell anyone.
Exactly. That's very true.
So they talked about relationships are the joy of life, even if they are hard at times. And relationships represent the high of highs of life as well as the most tormented lows. And
Mm.
and this idea, as Charlie's working on the garden as well as the pool at the 14,000 square foot house, um, how much the family and the love must be cultivated like a garden, regarding time, effort, and imagination. That time, effort, and imagination need to be summoned. And I think this is a very interesting idea, because relationships are a place of vulnerability, especially I think these days 1 out of 5 people are narcissistic. So it's how do you figure out how much to give? And I think in LA, it's 1 out of 4 people who are narcissistic. So
Yep.
again, it's also knowing, um, is that garden worth it? Because I think there was a point where Charlie said either it's going to be weeds, barren, or you care for it and you create a beautiful flower garden. Um,
Mm.
so, um, so yes, Michael, this young man, fell into a place of life where the weeds had crept in, and so Charlie's checking him on it in
Mm.
accountability. And Charlie also brought up that relationships are the backbone of our existence. And if
Hmm.
you lose your relationships, what good has your life been? I think that's one of the things you came across, Chris, when you kind of questioned the definition of success. And
Yes.
I'm just going to go back again to something Charlie said, that um, we have the power to tend to our relationships. And Charlie made the grounds beautiful. Um, and and one of the greatest gifts is to give time. I mean, I think it's very interesting with the affluent community. A lot of the times that, is it gifts or is it experiences? And I think many high net worth individuals, people who are not in need of anything, they really want the experiences of connection, because,
Mm.
but that is still independent of net worth. I mean, I think that when I look back on my life, it's the times that I played softball and my dad was cheering at the bleachers as I was catcher. I mean, that's that time investment. Or if I struggled with my
Hmm.
homework in high school, my dad helped me with history. Or, I mean, I've got, just as many good memories with my mother. But I think that it's that time piece when somebody thinks about time in relationships, and its quantity as well as quality. And
Mm.
so those are half of my notes. So what say you, Chris?
I love that Charlie starts off with, health and relationships, because it's like, imagine a life where you have all the health and frankly all the other success pillars in your life, but no relationships. And you burned all your bridges. And there's many people that have lived that way.
And they do that.
And it's like, it's just, it's hard to imagine how to live a truly happy and fulfilled and successful life without either family, friends, mentors, people you care about, significant others, and then vice versa. Like, imagine having everything. Everyone knows that, like, as soon as you don't have health, it's hard to enjoy everything else that life has given you, right? So those are such foundational things that you can't. Those are two pillars. Like, if you're going to sacrifice some other pillars, health and relationships should not be two of them, in my opinion. So, and there's also, if you all think about, like, all of the, if happiness is your, what you're chasing, not particularly what I'm, like, number one chasing in life, but a lot of people that are, if you look at a lot of people around the world, the average person, while the average US citizen is doing, we're much wealthier in almost every category than a lot of developing countries, for sure. The average happiness level in America, I would venture to say, is we're not the happiest, average citizen. The average is actually pretty dismal, like, in terms of 1 out of 3 people are obese. I just learned now that 1 out of 5, if not 1 out of 4 people, are narcissistic. But
people in East India, apparently are happier than Americans.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And my point is, they probably value relationships, and hopefully they, prioritize their health. And while maybe you don't have all the money or other success trappings in the world, the bare minimum, at least, that I would focus on is health and relationships. So yeah, when I think about, like, as I do this yearly goal setting process called RAFT goals. So it stands for results. What's the result I want to achieve? The second R is reason, which is the why. Why do I want to achieve this result? A is the actions. Why do I, what do I need to do, and who can help me figure out the how? F is for feedback, and, like, what mentors do I need in my life for guidance to achieve this goal? And T is the thrill, kind of like the fun. Like, why am I even doing this, right? So RRAFT. And I got this largely from Tony Robbins. But every year I basically take these 8 sections, pizza slices, that I have a visual I can, you can see on, like, my website, but largely this is the Tony Robbins concept. And for each area of life in these, which represents each pillar, I guess, for me, my 8 pillars are, again, like, relationships, lifestyle. I'll just actually run through them. I have them in front of me. Body, which is health, fitness, and appearance, how I feel, how I perform, and my body composition. Body, mind and emotions, relationships, lifestyle, career and mission, money and finances, spirituality, and contribution and giving back. This is kind of like the wheel of success, of whole life success. And so I every year kind of rate myself in these areas and see where I can do better. My point with relationships is while I am not thriving in all areas yet, the most important areas I do feel like I'm thriving in, and it's amazing. I mean, relationships consistently for the past 3 years I've done this exercise have been my highest area. I've rated myself like a 9 or higher than a 9 out of 10. And it's because I've prioritized, relationships so early, and a lot of wiser people than me imparted that to me, that relationships are just, incredibly important. But yeah, it's like, while I'm in pursuit of other things, the relationship piece has been so fundamental and powerful in my life that I feel it's been able to get me through the ups and the downs. As personally, professionally, life has been pretty challenging the past few years, with a lot of surprises.
Feast or famine, sometimes in sales.
Yeah, personal and professional surprises. That's also what makes life interesting. So yeah, relationships. That's more than 2 cents that I shared.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great, because sometimes people, when they become successful, they can fall into the trap of using people and loving things. And that's a very dangerous habit to fall into. And once they fall into it, it's sometimes it's hard for them to come back until life humbles them through a breakdown. I want to bring up one other point before I move on to the next pillar, the 4th pillar, which was Charlie had said it's hard to find a rich hermit. And I think about sometimes individuals that do become successful, sometimes they can live in a bubble. And that can be, there are the pros and the cons to that, because there is something to human connection and being able to walk in the park and talk with all different types of people and not be so closed off in a bubble that they lose touch with reality.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, any other
Love it.
thoughts on the third pillar?
No.
Okay, so we're going to jump into number 4. The fourth pillar is, and I think this is really great. It's simple, but it's a powerful reminder, and it's to achieve your goals. And I think some people can say, "Oh, yeah, I used to write goals," but I think that when somebody gets broken down, whether it's through the pandemic or inflation, and then they lose that hope, because one of the conversation points that Charlie made to Michael is the power of writing down even 100 goals that you'd like to complete before life ends.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, 100 goals, that's a lot to look forward
I
to.
know.
But I
That
think
is
it
a lot.
shifts somebody's focus from looking at, in coaching, they talk about there's like the what's wrong conversation, and it's being able to shift it over to the what's wanting to happen conversation. But sometimes
Hmm.
people get so stuck in the what's wrong, and rightfully so sometimes. But if they don't shift over, they can stay stuck in what I call that loop around the airport, and they're just driving
Mm.
another loop around the airport, another month in the lull of the days. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so Charlie made this point about like what or who do you have to become to make $1 million, and I think also this is a very interesting idea that who we are precedes the fruit of the labor, the
Mm.
results of the success, and to use the goals to make one a better person. And again, a better person is where somebody gets to refine themselves, even if it's not a comfortable process to get refined. Um,
Yes.
and Charlie made the point to this young man named Michael that you can change your direction overnight. You are
Mm.
where you're at, but you don't have to stay there. And so I think one of the questions I'd like to kick over to you, like a soccer ball, Chris, is what would you like to achieve in 10 years from now?
Oh boy.
And over to you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I already started to touch on this, at least the framework of how I think even to answer this question. And I do this pretty deep goal setting process once a year. It takes me about 1 to 2 days. I usually go to the past few years. It's funny. I found myself around the New Year in Carmel, California, kind of Carmel, Monterey, Big Sur area, to do this process by the ocean. It's just like something really restorative about it. But so I'll take each area of life. I'll go through the results, reasons, actions, feedback, thrill, or I'll rate myself for the past year. And then I'll think about how what would it take to get to a 10? If I'm at a 7 now in my body, what would it take to get to an 8, 9, 10? And so for me, I've even in like the result, I've thought about what do I want my ultimate vision to be and my ultimate purpose, which is call it like the 10, 20, 30-year vision, just a long-term vision. I'll call it 20 years for me. It's kind of what I've written down. And then I think about what's the result in this next year? And you always can break that down into quarterly, monthly, weekly goals. But I at least want to have this long-term vision of where I'm headed, and then what to course correct for this year. Where do I need to go to be on track for that long-term vision? And so it would take a whole nother podcast to go deeply in every area of where I want to see myself in each area of life. But I have, goals for my spirituality, my body, mind and emotions, relationships, and especially the ones where I'm further from a 10 is areas where I'd like to focus more on that particular year to shore up some weak areas of life. And it's worked well for me the past few years that I've been doing this process. I've been able to even out this wheel of life, so that it's not as choppy. This is one of the first exercises you'll do actually when you go to a Tony Robbins event, like a UPW that I've been to a while back in LA. So is there a specific, I don't know, I'm
Just
happy to answer for
yeah,
me,
if you
but
just had any insights that you wanted to share, because I think that just being able to speak into it, if somebody out there is, crushed from maybe life's circumstances right now, it's good to hear someone else say, yeah, I'm stepping into possibilities. I'm living it.
yeah,
And I think you've like done triathlons, marathons, something.
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think just that it could be a source of inspiration that, especially when we see the numbers of young people in suicide and depression today. Whew,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's tough.
So I think to speak into the positive is valuable. So any other thoughts or feelings that you might have regarding pillar number 4, achieve your goals?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, so much. A lot of the books I've read is around goal setting and so many success books there's like so much science behind writing down your goals, and I think even the 12 Pillars book talks about it. But there's crazy studies out there. I think that Harvard did about people that wrote down their goals and tracking that versus those that didn't, and tracking them 30 years later, and like the stats are just absolutely shocking. For me, another thing I'd add around goal setting is like I read a book called, maybe we'll do a whole other podcast on this one, but Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey, which is a great one. Have you read it, Angelina?
I haven't, but I follow Tony Robbins, and I have walked across the hot coals. That was quite an experience. So
Okay.
I'm aware of some of his content.
So Tony, yes, but Green Lights by
Yeah,
Matthew
he went to
McConaughey.
Africa. I think Matthew McConaughey. Because,
Yes.
Yeah, he was like, I got to know.
Or
I got to know.
somewhere. Yeah, the desert somewhere.
If I don't know,
and then, yeah,
I got to know. It kept him up at night.
So Matthew McConaughey, in his dorm room, I think before he hit it big on really anything, or it was around the time he filmed his first film, Dazed and Confused, but he wrote 10 goals for life. And reading his Matthew McConaughey's list in Green Lights inspired me to create my own list of kind of like a very high level 10 goals for my life, which I can share. That these 10 goals of life coincide with the 8 areas of life that, part of my raft, my pizza. It makes more sense visually when you see my wheel of life. But my 10 goals for life, I'm happy to share, is 1 is keep God first. 2 is be an incredible father and husband. 3 is chase my best self, which I break down. 4 is prioritize family and friends. 5 is lean into fear. 6, consume less, create and give more. 7, achieve and maintain time, financial, and location freedom early. 8 is look back and enjoy the view. 9 is feel good now. 10 is make an impact. That relates to leaving a legacy. So those are super high level concepts that mean a lot to me, and a lot of them I've broken down into with different quotes and things. But those all tie back to the different areas of life and help provide the why of what I'm doing in each area.
And it's a good structure. Yeah.
I've refined it over a few years, and it's worked for me.
Okay, so I'm going to transition over to pillar number 5 for the sake of time. And speaking of time, Charlie talked to Michael about the proper use of time. He spoke about discipline weighs ounces while regret weighs tons. And if you don't achieve your goals, the ones that are deep in your heart and soul and mind, you will end up having deep regrets, which some people do come the end of their life. And they are, I don't know if you've met them, Chris, but they can be very bitter.
Mm-hmm. I have, yeah.
Yeah. And the end of life will come sooner than you want. And so many people let themselves, so many never let themselves dream. Most never overcome their fears to strive for their dream. And then one day they wake up and they're on their deathbed. And I think this idea of facing your fears is a really important conversation. And we won't have the time to break it down today, but fear is actually the number one thing for both men and women. So like in military intelligence, they know that fear can control both men and women equally. And so that is, I think, a starting point to be able to process and work through. So Charlie spoke to young Michael about the crushing weight of the pain of regret. The days are expensive in terms of time, and you only have, one last day to spend. And I think it is very interesting because no matter how successful somebody is, time is a non-renewable resource, even if there's stem cell therapy and some of the latest technology and somebody tells someone else they can freeze their body. But yeah, once that time has run out, that's it. So Charlie makes this point to spend each day wisely, not to spend your days getting by, which I know some people do. It's like they're on a race to the grave. They just want to get through this life because they're so miserable because they can't find a way to make or to find that joy or to work through the fear, and then that fear crushes them. And so Charlie spoke about this idea of activities. Find activities that align with your overall goals. And the trap is when you give your time to the urgent compared to the important. The urgent is a tyrant, a master that enslaves you if you let it. So therefore, be the master of time. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Man, the quote under the proper use of time is every day has many opportunities, but only one best opportunity. And I think my main thoughts around this whole chapter is being wise about like everyone has this fixed. We're all bound by time. It's kind of the equalizer. Jeff Bezos has the same time that you or I have, and how is he a multi-billionaire? It's like he's obviously solved a way bigger problem than you or I have solved in a lot of ways. But and he's pursued different businesses that allow him to create a massive scalable business that was Amazon. But he's figured out how to use his time super efficiently and for the highest leverage activities. And in every area, it's like one of the hardest problems I remember. I turned 28 for those that care in last year in December. And I remember just the transition from like college to working life, and just a lot of my friends really trying to now struggle with how do we balance all the areas of life. Like, realizing, I remember having several discussions with friends and mentors being like, does it get easier to balance or does it get harder? And ultimately, life can get more complicated once you have a family and kids and other people to now worry about, and just more and more responsibilities at work, and to balance these different areas. And how do you not drop the ball on these spinning plates of life? And ultimately, it comes down to this pillar, the proper use of time in each, scheduling time. And I'm a big scheduler, huge planner. I live kind of largely by my calendar. And, for the things that are most important in my life related to relationships, health, my spirituality, I do my best to schedule it in so that those are things that are not, those are non-negotiables in my calendar, as they're the most important to me. There's the simple quote of like, show me your calendar and I'll show you your, results, basically. And I think a lot of the simplest way people fail is that they fail to focus on the important, and they try to focus on the urgent, like the book says, or they just don't make time for the things that are most important because they're distracted. And there's a million ways to be distracted, by all sorts of things today.
Yes. Can I add one final thought before we close out with pillar number 6?
Please.
Okay. I think Charlie Davis also made a point about it's important to be the designer of your life. If you don't design your own life plan, also known as life planning, someone else will, and their interest may not be your interest. And I thought that was so interesting. That was kind of part of the seed of why I started legacy planning, copyright legacy planning, design your legacy. Has to do with this idea of everyone's got these business plans out there, but then one of the things you probably have come across in commercial real estate, Chris, is the person that writes the contract writes it in their favor.
A lot of the times.
So I think this idea that we can have that personal agency, and like you spoke about before, there's formal education and then there's self-education. I think there is this kind of like when somebody finds themselves in like this wide open field, because when they're growing up, and whether they're in public or private school, they're told to show up to this class, the bell rings, they got to go to that class, or even on a college campus, it's structured, and the curriculum, where your next class is, et cetera, and then you're going to go to graduation, it's all mapped and planned out. Then you get to the real world, and those handrails aren't always there. Or even more advanced and immediate is if somebody has a very successful business and then they sell it, and now they've got this gigantic financial nest egg, and again they find themselves in the middle of Kansas, metaphorically, of just what do I do now? Where is the roadmap? And who can I talk to that has been here, or that can help me or give me good advice? Because again, bad advice, whoa, that's expensive, because it's a loss of time. So I just go back to this idea regarding Charlie speaking to young Michael about time. Either you run your day, the day runs you. Either you control your time or it controls you. Something will be the master, something will be the servant. And again, asking someone to step into their personal agency the best that they can, where they're at, to make some decisions. And if they don't know, that's also okay. Everyone has their first day, but then find somebody within their world, even online or in a book, such as Jim Rohn and the 12 Pillars, that can help guide them.
Absolutely.
Okay, should I move on to 6?
Let's do it.
Okay, number 6 is surround yourself with the best people. And I thought this one was the one that, okay. Yeah, this one really was kind of, hit some emotion in my world. Anyways, Charlie talked about go go where the expectation and the demands are high, people that
Hmm.
expect more from you. Um, and he talked about this idea of finding people who live consistently with their values and skills. And I think one of the things is, as we're growing up, we find people that we relate to in school. And then again, after school, we have to go and make adult friends. And that's like a whole new thing. And he brought up 7 questions regarding how the people around you affect you. You know, number one, who are you around? Like your 3 or 5 closest friends. Number 2, what effect are they having on you? Number 3, what have they got you reading? Number 4, what have they got you saying? Because, like you said, influence is very subtle. Number 5, where do they have you going? Is
Hmm.
it to some event that uplifts you, or is it something that is an event that has a bunch of naysayers that are unhappy with life? Because there's lots of people in the crab bucket that'll pull you down in this world if you're not careful where you go. And they don't want that shiny light in the room if you're in that wrong room. Number 6, what do they have you thinking about? Number 7, what do they have you becoming? And, it was a little bit cut and dry because, again, I think sometimes people can fall on hard times. And, I don't think that you should just like throw the baby out with the bathwater. But he did bring up this good point about expanding new associations, because what we are spending our time doing, it affects our attitude, how we look at something, and then obviously our thoughts manifest into things and new open doors and possibilities. And to protect ourselves from the wrong influences, and sometimes we have to learn the hard way who those wrong influences are.
Many times, yeah.
Yeah, because we don't know. Sometimes going in time is a great teller. You talk about poker and the tells. And influence is so subtle, and each association can either have a positive, neutral, or negative effect. And I'm going to finish out with this, and then I'll ask you your thoughts. He created these 3 categories, and I thought it was a little harsh, but it's honest. Um, the first category is disassociation. The second category is limited association, and then the third is, yeah. So first disassociation, second limited association, and then third expanded association. And to put the people in our lives into one of these 3 categories in terms of asking what kind of relationship is it, and then how do we approach it in terms of challenging the person we want to become because of who we are giving our time, our most important asset to. Because there can be friends of convenience, but when we can open ourselves up to all sorts of new knowledge, it changes, what we learn about how the world works, how business works, and also the keys to bettering our relationships. Your thoughts, Chris?
I don't know if I don't think he mentions this verbatim in the book, but the whole concept in a nutshell is you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And it's like, the first time I heard that many years ago, it really makes you think. It's like, who do I even spend the most time with? And how am I more similar to them than I even realize? And, my friends have, obviously you can't change your family, but you can choose your friends. And my friends have evolved a lot throughout the last 10 years as I've gone to business school and gotten to different businesses. And I there hasn't been too many people I've like had to intentionally cut out or like intentionally disassociate with. I found that those relationships, as I've continued to continue to grow, they naturally, you just have less in common with people, and it's a few relationships that have just naturally drifted away. What I have found is that I've had to be very intentional creating the relationships and forming the relationships I want to um, pursue further and that I want to influence me, because typically it's mentors. I mean, the average, being in my late 20s, most of my friends are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's like half are in my 30s, are older than me. Half are probably around my same age, which might be rare for my age. But I've just had to be pretty intentional with those relationships and definitely questioning how they're influencing me. And the past few years, particularly making some pivots on different groups that I'm spending less time with here. For me, it was like general real estate networking groups. I kind of asked myself, a lot of them are just like drinking clubs, basically, like frat party. I mean, like just not super beneficial. And especially becoming a father recently, a year and a half ago. Like I've really had to question with my time being more limited and still it being important for me to continue to meet new people and form new relationships. Really be more intentional with the groups I am and the friends I am spending time with. And so I've made some changes there, and they have contributed to great growth in several important areas of life. And you know, that's what I would advise other people to do, is really audit their relationships, the people that they're spending the most time with, but also the groups where they're trying to form new relationships as well.
Yes. And also to realize it takes time. So if somebody doesn't wake up tomorrow, don't be so hard on yourself if you don't have the ideal 5 key people. Sometimes it's easier given life's circumstances, and other times it
Yes.
takes a season to kind of find and cultivate new friendships and relationships. So, since this is a legacy podcast, Chris, what would you like your holistic legacy to be, and what does this word mean to you?
My holistic legacy, it really ties back to like whole life success and what Jim Rohn talks about in living a life that will help others in all these other areas, spiritually, intellectually, physically, financially, relationally. Resonates so true with me and how I define legacy too. Living a life that serves as an example of what an exceptional life can look like. For me, at the core of my spiritual beliefs is the spiritual impact. Is I'd like everything I do to reflect my spiritual values and how I show up in that way. Much easier said than done. Made plenty of mistakes. I'll make plenty more, but that's ultimately like my legacy and my purpose. Of course, as it relates to my family, my friends that actually know me, but also the maybe a book I leave, or the videos and different content and blog that I leave behind after I'm gone. But one thing I would say around legacy is I generally agree with the people that are like, no one's really going to know me. And, no one really knows me now, let alone say I do create some sort of like big legacy while I'm on Earth. And it's like in 200 years, most people aren't going to know Chris Ford. So I'm not overly attached to like, oh, I need my name to live on forever. It's like, it's not, I try to take the ego and kind of pride out of it. Yeah, it is important.
What would you say are your top 3 or 4 core values?
3 or 4 core values. I think like honesty, and I've always considered myself a truth seeker, but like being able to be honest with yourself and with others. I think a lot of people, including myself in different ways and throughout my life, like aren't honest with themselves. And if you're not honest with yourself, it's hard to like grow and change. It's like if you're clearly not healthy, but you tell yourself, oh no, I'm good. Like, it's like you're never going to change because you're not honest with yourself. And so it's important, related to hanging out with the best people, surround yourself with the best people, is people that can be honest with each other. If you can't be honest with someone, you're never going to have that deep of a relationship. Also, like, I believe that about vulnerability as well. If you're not willing to be vulnerable and share what's really going on in your life in the right rooms with the right people, then it's like a superficial relationship. It's not going to get very deep. You're not really going to learn and grow as much as you could from it. So honesty is a huge, important value of mine. Like lifelong learning that, Jim Rohn talks about, in this idea of personal development, is super, super important. Could you ask the question again? I'm trying
Sure,
to
just your
think.
top 3 or 4 core values.
Core values. Continual personal improvement. This idea of honesty, like becoming the best version of yourself, is related to daily personal improvement, getting 1% better every day, or 0.1% better. My faith's extremely important to me. Those are some ideas.
Yeah. I think in a prior podcast, you mentioned that the Japanese don't have a word for retirement.
Oh, ikigai. Yeah, it's a Japanese concept that really relates to career and mission of, like the Japanese have this word called ikigai. It basically translates to your reason for being. And it's the intersection of 4 key questions. What am I good at? What does the world need? what can I be well compensated for, and what do I love to do. And I largely feel it's taken me a while, and like 8, 9, 10 years in real estate, to feel like I'm finally starting to grasp my ikigai, at least in the career and mission bucket of life. And it's something I'd encourage everyone to answer those questions deeply and continue to move towards.
Yeah. And final question, if you were to set aside a weekend or two in the next year to create a hardcover coffee table book for your office, for your living room, what would be in it?
Well, I would just give people 12 pillars. So I wouldn't need to create it myself. That's why I've given it away so many times. But mine would relate to this whole idea of whole life success, and breaking down further. It would be like a 12 pillars, but it would be more maybe actionable, in the sense that like it would break down how, like, my goal setting process and how I think about the ultimate vision and how it relates to what I'm doing today. It would be related to whole life success and just being intentional. And I don't know what I would call it, but if not, it'd maybe be like Chris's 8 pillars or something. I don't know.
Cool. Before I read out my closing paragraph, I just wanted to say thank you for suggesting this book, being a guest speaker, and just bringing your level of honesty to this conversation. I mean, we've talked about some good topics in real world, and what it takes to be successful, think about success, and question success, and not just accept somebody else's definition of it, but rather look internally and finding the answers of what fits. So any closing thoughts before I read out my paragraph?
No, I just thank you for having me on. Thank you for reading the book. I recommend a lot of books to a lot of people, and it's sometimes rare that they actually buy the book and read it. So I appreciate you for doing that, and I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you. Okay. In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I consult. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education or preparation in the move or moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're tuning in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SoundCloud, please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends. Thank you so much for joining us this week. And thank you, Chris, for speaking into your legacy.
Thank you.